Right, thanks a lot for coming in, Sandy.
It's a pleasure.
Would you like to tell us something about yourself then, local author and writer? Not that I know the difference between author and writer, mind you.
Well, that's another story of another day. Basically, well, despite my accent, I am local, born and brought up here in the northeast, and have lived here pretty much all my life. I've been interested in writing and storytelling since I was little. First thing I ever wrote, which wasn't for school, just for myself, was a James Bond story, because I was worried they're going to run out of books. So I thought I'd better step into the gap and help them out.
And films.
Yeah. Well, I adored the films. I was, what happens if they run out of books? Then since then, carried on, and I was in the position where I sort of aspired to write, but I wasn't actually achieving a great deal, wasn't doing very much. And then I was lucky to run into an old friend, Elaine Cusack, who's a local poet, and she encouraged me to start attending what are called open mic events, which is when anybody from the audience can stand up and say their piece. And so I started doing that, normally telling folk tales and then writing stories, and since then, after a major health scare about 3 years ago, I decided to really concentrate more on this, and so I've been out and about doing storytelling, of trying to sell stories. I've just recently sold one to an American magazine.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Occult Detective Quarterly, so you can probably guess what sort of story it is. And that's the position I'm in now. I'm also the co-host of the North Tyneside Writers Circle, which isn't quite as grand as it sounds. That's just a group that meets every month in North Shields Library, of people who are writers or interested in writing, and we compare notes.
So what's it take for somebody to call themselves a writer then?
You really have to have written something. It is pretty much as simple as that. Although a publisher many years ago I once spoke to said that you couldn't call yourself a proper writer, if there is such a thing, unless you had been published by somebody you didn't know and got paid for it.
Okay,
Which
right.
I think that's a bit harsh, especially now, and when self-publishing is very much on the up and up.
So, as you know, the theme of our programme today is arts in the northeast for older people. So, an older person living in Newcastle feels that they've got a story inside them somewhere.
Well, everybody has a story, even if it's their story.
Oh, right.
Because everybody has had a unique life, and it can get so easily lost if you don't tell it.
And so how can they get to tell it then?
Well, one of the reasons I'm happy to be living in this part of the world is there is a very active literary writing scene in the northeast. There's any number of writers' groups, friendly groups where you can go along, talk about problems you're having or ideas, and you can share your work, and you will get feedback from other writers. In these groups, of course, that sounds a bit alarming. It is always very firm that it has to be it has to be positive feedback. So you're not going to go in there and have somebody say, well, that was awful, don't you ever dare write a word again. And there's things like, I say, the open mic events and the Writers' Circle. There is a huge amount. It may involve a bit of shopping around to find a group that suits you.
Yes, huge amount shopping around. Now, we have a newsletter and a fortnightly e-bulletin as well,
right,
which the Elders Council publishes. Would you be able to let me have a list of these writers' groups, or people who actually aspire, as it were, in their retirement to do a bit of writing, so
Yes.
that our members can find out where they can go and just try it out.
As I'll see what I can put together and let you know. That'll be marvellous.
Isn't it a bit intimidating, though, perhaps?
Yes.
For some people.
Yes, it is.
So how do you manage to sort of calm people down, as it were, to allow them to get this story out?
Well, you need to have a supportive, friendly atmosphere and an understanding that, well, all of us in the room feel much the same. There's a thing called imposter syndrome, where you spend your time thinking, is this the day when somebody's going to stand up and say, no, you're not all right, leave the room now. So we all have that, so you're not alone.
Good, right. Now we've come to the point in our chat where I ask you what piece of music you'd like us to play for you. Could you tell us what it is and why you've chosen it?
Well, I've chosen a single by the band Sparks called This Town Ain't Big Enough for the Both of Us. This was the first single I ever bought, and people who were watching Top of the Pops in the early 70s may well remember the band Sparks. It was two brothers, one of whom had looked fairly conventional for the time. The other was incredibly thin, had a Hitler moustache, and spent the entire performance playing the keyboards and glaring at the audience. And I've always loved this song, and so I thought this is the one I'd love to hear.
Sparks.